Hey.
Hi, this is Zach Log the Great, and I am here with two friends of mine tonight. Chris, say hello,
Hello.
and Nate will be joining us as well. Hopefully, this will be a regular thing. And tonight
Hello.
we're going to be say hello, Nate.
I already did. Hi.
Oh, sorry, I think I was
Hey,
talking about me.
everybody.
Anyway, tonight we're going to be talking about Shakespeare's Sonnet number 2. So. Um, Nate, you're the newcomer. Would you do you have anything you'd like to any thoughts you'd like to throw out starting off?
Well, I mean, like anything Shakespeare, it's well written. Good use of words and all that's kind of what you expect out of the bard, right? I have to say, though, I was kind of disappointed with the content. It seems like, Kardashian level advice to your good friend. Like, hey, you're super hot. You should totally procreate so that when people are challenging you later in life, like, were you really hot? You can be like, bruh, look at the fruit of my loins. And they'll be like, word.
Well, to be fair on that scale, this is one of and I should know this because I'm running this series. This is one of like 14 or 15 sonnets where he gives his friend the general advice to
Yeah, the so-called procreation sonnets.
yeah. So go out
Like,
and make
yeah,
babies.
wasn't all about it. He was like, Bill, maybe, just perhaps, I'll hold off on that. And Bill was like, nah, bro, dim babies.
So, if the whole argument here is have kids so people will know that you were really hot when you were younger, then would like accurate like photography and film just like completely destroy this argument now?
I believe it would. Yes, Facebook has murdered the purpose of this sonnet. Like, why do I need to have kids? I can just be like, these are my
Wait.
profile pics.
No, no. There's also the last two lines. The turn of the sonnet saves it for those purposes, because he says, "This is to be newborn when thou art old." Okay, and see thy blood warm when thou feelst it cold. So it's not entirely wiped out.
Once we get cloning down pat, it's over.
Well, now this does also have the
Technology
problem.
ruins everything.
This does also have the problem that it's no good if your friend is ugly.
True.
If you have
I
an
mean, hey,
ugly
matter of
friend,
taste, right?
if you have an ugly friend, this argument is not going to do any good at all. But you'll tell them this, and they'll be like, I have a mirror. I am not under any illusions."
Yeah, seriously though, like I think a lot of the weirdness is just sort of like shifting values. Like we could apply this to sort of like a lot of more general things, and it still does kind of hold. Uh, I mean, even if it's just strength, like yeah, at some point you're gonna be relatively weak. You'll need people to do things for you.
Yeah.
Like there's just lots of different aspects to that, but it does seem weird. You don't usually have a lot of guys these days like going on about each other's beauty.
That is true. I know that
Yeah,
I
because
personally have about two metrics for male attractiveness. Ugly as a rusty bucket, or he ain't ugly. And there's
I mean,
also The Rock. I just
I can admit
make me one of
handsome
them.
when I see it. It's just it's not like it's not something at the top of my mind usually. Whereas if you see a hot woman, like it's hard not to think about that. So,
At least for a moment. But
well, it
then again,
also
I got one right in the house, so I'm like, hey, baby.
yeah, it also depends whose company you're in.
Yes.
So two of us here tonight are have taken the advice ourselves, and one of us is about to get married shortly. Um, as
So
someone
now
who
clear conscience give him the advice. Although I don't think me and you, Sean, did it because because we're worried about preserving our beauty.
it wasn't prime in my motivations, but it's still not a bad bonus.
Well,
It
I
is.
just
Eh,
I
Go ahead,
will
Chris.
say for me, it is the primary reason. I mean, I'm not showing my actual face here just because I don't want to. I don't want to be too distracting.
You don't want to
Oh,
make
man.
us look. You don't want to make us look bad by contrast.
Exactly.
That's fair
Yeah.
enough.
No, that's totally fair.
Um,
Uh,
Congratulations, by the way, Chris, again on your upcoming wedding, and I am going to be very glad to be there. But
Thank you.
so as a father, Nate, is there any particular part of this that struck you, or does it just not seem particularly relevant?
uh, I mean, as a father, I think my sons are better looking than I am. So I'm like, yes, it is going to be, they make me proud. I mean, I think there are a lot of better reasons to become a father, uh, and then just to say that, hey, look, I was handsome because, I got good genes, right? Check these guys out. Because, what if their mom was real pretty and you were just, it didn't take long. It didn't take 40 winters to dig furrows through your brow. It took like 26, and you were like already done for. But you married a pretty woman, and she kind of held up the team there. So I just feel like there's a lot better reasons to have kids, and maybe the other procreation sonnets get into that. Don't know. Haven't
Well,
read
I,
them.
I feel like that's where if you sort of like expand it a little bit, it makes a little more sense because you could sort of use like, okay, your particular way of thinking are your morals, like stuff like that. Someday you're not going to be around, but children are a way to pass on those parts of you that you value.
So yeah,
It may
you're
not,
No, that I
yeah,
can definitely get behind.
yeah, it may not be beauty, but if that was what was important in Shakespeare's time, then that would be what he went for. Or at the very least, it makes a nice little metaphor.
well, and
Yeah.
one thing I found very surprising, and I didn't notice myself until like someone started pulling up some old pictures of me from when I was a kid, and oh my gosh, like at about the same age, how much I look like my older son was just stunning. I'm like I didn't realize this, and like you see him, you it's a thing with with your family where like you see their face all the time, you see your face all the time, and you tend to notice the differences because that's just kind of the way we're built. But then when you get one of these moments and you're like, well, geez, this does feel like a little bit like a photocopier here. um,
Yeah, no. With my boys, sometimes I get that, especially the oldest one, because he's kind of got. To those watching, you may not believe this, but yes, he has my curly hair.
Mhm.
Yeah, when I'm not bound by regulation to keep a certain length of hair, I typically rock a pretty nice little mop, and
Well, you
it's
see, the poem is already working for you. You don't have the curly hair, but you can just point to him.
God, the bard got me.
well, I do say one thing I think is interesting, and one thing that's always worthwhile paying attention in Shakespeare's work is the metaphors he shifts through in the poem, because like the first stanza is largely like military metaphors, which is kind of like
Hmm.
a you know might seem a strange approach to a poem about you should go out and have kids, because it talks about age like a besieging army, which is going to destroy you.
Well, I mean
Ugh.
that's really an apt comparison because I mean age and time, it's not one grand battle that decides everything. It's this, wearisome attrition, that it just breaks down one little part of you and another little part of you and then another little part of you. It reduces you, brick by brick until finally it conquers you and you're in the grave. But, like I said, it's not all at once, so a siege and military imagery really makes sense.
I had not considered that one. Yeah, it's And I may not look it. Most people guess rather younger by my appearance, but I am I am old enough that I feel these things. The effects I don't actually feel yet. I can see on the horizon that, like, oh boy, it's not gonna be too much longer before I'm gonna get like aching joints and all these things, and you're like, huh. I didn't. You don't notice when you're younger. You don't think about these things. It never occurs to you in a visceral way that this stuff is coming for you too. So
And playing Nerf darts in the park at midnight, and you're just like, I'll live forever.
Yeah.
Right?
sleep. Who needs sleep? No, I need sleep.
Yeah, god dang it.
Yeah, I can have one bad night and be okay. A couple of them, like one after the other, and I start to really notice it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and this was not
I
not
feel
quite the
like
way
10,
things
15
worked.
years old to have this conversation, because now I'm starting to get sad. I'm like, come on, man, get that old.
Well, the ne-
Look
I,
at the
I
light so you
promise
can see my face and I look pained.
I promise all of them aren't going to be depressing. Although I don't know about next week's. I don't know quite what you guys will think. But oh, and
I hear the baby crying. But
Yeah, so then he goes from military to fashion.
well,
mhm.
let's see. Well, the youth's proud livery um, is kind of both. Because I mean, livery would have to do with like, wouldn't that be like a something like a uniform, or like your
Yeah,
a dis-
like the clothes that you would provide to, like, like a noble would provide to his squires would be his livery. So in a sense, it sort of carries forward the military metaphor. Um,
and now the thing
but
that
in an
people
interesting contrast, sorry, Sean, I cut you off there.
no go
It's an interesting contrast though, because I mean, when you talk about it, like we mentioned, the Stormlight Archive, how Adolin was all obsessed with fashion, but he mentions at one point that military uniforms don't ever go out of style. They always look good. And so, this whole proud livery, it may be a little out of date, but it kind of says that you're going to
well
age gracefully, even if you age until you're dead. So it's kind of
well
a fun, I guess, an almost unintended contrast, but with Shakespeare, you can't really call something unintentional. It might just be really subtle.
at the same time, the uniform, the idea of the uniform, the style of the uniform might be long lasting, but that particular uniform you're wearing, if you have to wear that for an extended period of time, especially say through a siege, is not going to look very good before long.
Point, point taken.
Um,
Point taken and fairly made.
and
Especially because they would have been back then more brightly colored. They wouldn't have been going for camo. So the degradation of the cloth would have been much more readily apparent.
Hmm.
And one other thing in line four, because it's not the way the word is commonly used now. Although I've read enough Shakespeare that I had caught this previously. A tattered weed. He's not talking about plants that are growing where they're not supposed to, but weed is also a kind of clothing. Like in, and I can't remember where. I know in one of his plays he refers to widow's weeds, like what the clothing a widow would wear in mourning. So that continues that. That's not a complete changeover there. So let's see. Then the second stanza, um, if you want to look at the metaphors, the second stanza is kind of talking about business and accounting. Like, you had this treasure, you had this fortune, you had this account, and what did you do with it? Um, and
No
he
meaning,
says,
apparently.
if you and he says, if all you can say is, well, here I am. It actually, now I hadn't thought about this before, but it a little bit reminds me of the parable of the talents, from the Gospels,
Oh
where
yeah.
Yeah,
Jesus,
I can see that.
where Jesus says, okay, there, you know, or in the parable, the boss says, here's some money. I gotta go take care of some other stuff. You invest this and make good use of it. And that's yeah, it seems a little bit like what's going on here. Like you were given this body, you were given this life, um, and you know you can spend it all on yourself, and you can choose to have momentary selfish pleasure right now, or you can invest this. You can give up some degree of short-term self-interest and pass on life, and you can invest this and get bigger returns essentially.
Yeah. That is a good point. Like I said, I like anything that tends toward the scriptures because it's kind of like the root of literature, if you ask me. But
We don't have we have a few things earlier, but not a lot in Western tradition at least. Like, there's the Epic of Gilgamesh, um,
I think
and
does
like if you're looking,
Beowulf.
no, I very much doubt that. At least not older than the Old Testament, certainly. Um,
At least from a very different tradition,
yes,
I would
yes.
imagine.
Although the other thing about Beowulf is that the copy we have is was almost certainly transcribed by Christian monks, and so
True,
there probably was some degree of Christianity edited in.
sort of Christian.
true. It's been a while since I've read it, but that's basically what happened with like all of our knowledge of Norse mythology as well.
Jeez, what would have been like raw? Because that's still really hardcore.
So, by the way, although we have been picking a little bit at the particular angle of argument Shakespeare used here, I would like to say I fully endorse the general message of you know you should probably get married and go have kids. Um, I mean, I guess there are some
It does
people
make
where
you a better person. Well, it can make you a better person if you allow it to. Because I know that before my sons were born, I was a lot more selfish kind of guy. Like, getting married kind of made me take a level in selflessness because I wanted to remain so. And then having kids, kind of made me, get I had to get better at putting myself on the back burner sometimes, and kind of rolling with things and understanding even more that nope, you got people depending on you now, so you don't get to pick. You don't get to pick yourself.
yeah, the two things with that for me, like the just the general you know grow the heck up. You have to take things more seriously now. I have I will definitely say there was a very significant impact on that with me, and just the sense that, oh, this is not a game, and this is not just fun. And I on that
Yeah.
scale, I am very unhappy with how I was before, but I am glad that I have improved. And
Well,
the
I
other
mean,
thing,
to an extent, you can't help who you were before because looking back, you see the problems. In the moment, you're like, no, I'm all right.
but the other thing about having kids, and this is something that worries me when a lot of people don't have children. The other thing about having kids is instantly, the moment you see that little baby, and the moment you hold your son, your daughter, um, your timeline for the future, your thinking about how things are going to go extends like 20 or 30 years. Because if it's just you and you don't have any kids, all you have to worry about, all you have to plan for is till you die. And after that, if the entire world goes to hell, it's not your problem. But
Après
if you,
moi, la déluge, or whatever
yeah,
the hell that French king said.
I don't. I know what the saying is, but I don't speak French, so I'm not even going to try it. I
Says
should,
after
considering
me.
where I am.
So
Huh?
basically, he's referencing Noah. He says, "After me, the flood." Says, "World's over after I die. Don't care." It's
Well,
a very irresponsible sort of thing.
I
I don't
actually,
speak French, so any French speakers that see this and hate me for mangling that pronunciation, I'm not going to apologize. I just don't speak French.
but yeah, and I don't know the entire context of that, so I don't know whether he was saying he's fine with that or just that this is what's going to happen because he sees that no one after him is going to be able to hold it together. I'm not sure, but yeah, and I actually saw a list of like leaders of a lot of European nations, childless, 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 and it's like, oh, why are they planning so poorly for 20 or 30 years down the line of their nation? Because it's not their problem, and it never will be.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I think, though, we have strayed somewhat from Shakespeare at
that
this
too.
point.
Would you like to bring it back on track? Any comments on the poem itself?
Well, I mean, his last, the last little couplet there, that'll bring warmth to your bones when you feel cold. That is true for me, even now. I'm not an old man, although, well, at heart, but not in body yet.
Get off my lawn!
Yeah, goddamn kids these days and their dadgum banana phones or whatever. Nah, but seeing my boys play together makes me happy. Days when I'm like, I think I would actually rather burn down the office than go sit in it for 8 hours. I I give the boys a hug and a kiss goodbye, and and suddenly I'm like, well, okay, maybe I'll go sit in it for 8 hours because they need to eat and not have a dad who's a felon. So
You're
I mean,
only a
even now,
felon if they catch
they've
you.
I'm familiar with the base lockdown procedures. They'd catch me. Also, my license plate, my car has my name on it because of the license plate. So, whoops. I may have
Chris,
locked myself out of a life of crime for a while.
Chris, would you care to jump in?
I mean, as far as the kids stuff, y'all kind of have the better perspective. I have a couple of cats, but I don't think that does much here.
Oh, so you don't believe in fur babies?
Well, see, you're on the first side of it. So, like, you can provide a little bit of a contrast what you think before having
Uh,
kids.
yeah, I think it's a lot what you say, where like it is an investment in the future, and that is one part of the advice that I do like that Shakespeare is giving here, where it's you do have this treasure, and now what are you going to do with it? Where even if the treasure isn't specifically beauty, like he's saying, right now you have this thing. Now is the only time you can do something with it. If you wait, it's going to disappear. Think about what you're going to do.
Yeah, and a lot of people will say it's not particularly fair, and I suppose you're right. That definitely applies to women. It applies to women rather more than to men. And so,
Well,
if
I mean, oh wait, are we talking about the beauty specifically, or the just the admonition in total? Because
I was thinking
throughout
about
all this,
I
yeah,
was
go
just
ahead.
thinking about the ticking timer there.
Oh, yeah.
Although there are disadvantages, and it's a little less likely, men can have children pretty much
Pretty much
until the
till the
end
day
of their
they die.
life. Women by the mid-30s, if you haven't got that going, not entirely likely to happen, and you may be looking at 4 or 5
Issues.
decades of regret. So,
although I do think it is interesting that this does seem to be addressed to a guy, because I can't remember the author's name, but there is a poem I read in school. It was I think it was like The Helmet Seller or something, where it was addressed to a woman, and it was basically like, hey, I really want to sleep with you, so you should really like start sleeping around. And it was sort of like hidden as like advice from an old woman to a young woman, being like, yeah, I missed my chance to sleep around, you shouldn't miss your chance. But it was written by a guy.
Is this relatively recent, or how do you know about when this was written? I've never heard of this.
I would have to look this up. It was in I think one of my world literature classes. I could be wrong. But yeah, it was basically like this idea of, you need to enjoy life now, except it was only about the pleasure aspect, and it was sort of ignore the future, enjoy now.
Well, that's not very modern.
Well,
again,
I mean, it's always
forever. So
yeah, that's always been a temptation. Although it does seem to be rather more the way our society is going in general today. Hopefully,
that poem got real popular about 40, 50 years ago. People are like, that sounds like great advice.
So, I don't know. I don't think I have a lot else. I don't think I have a lot else to say here. I don't think I have a lot else to throw in. Any big things you two missed, or are we close to wrapping up?
I think that's pretty much up for me.
Contemplative.
I mean, it's very well constructed. It's exactly what you expect from Shakespeare. I think this guy's going places. He's going to make it
big. We'll keep an eye on him. We'll look out for future output from this writer. All right.
Guys, I mean, he seems pretty skilled, but something tells me we might be waiting a minute to get any new works out of him.
All right. Well, in that case, then I will close off, and thank you guys for joining me, and God be with you.
Have a good one.